Welcome to Mind and Soul Matters. I'm Farah Feeney. Through conversations with everyday people, Mind and Soul Matters, a Baha'i-inspired podcast, aims to broaden our understanding of mental health and spirituality and to deepen our insights into the challenges and meaning of our lives. Our guest today is Maya. Maya was born in Northern Ireland and arrived in Australia at the age of 2, accompanied by her loving parents. Maya had a happy childhood until the age of 15, when her life took a turn. And as Maya once said to me, suffering is the main trigger point for compassion and hope. Welcome, Maya. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Farah.
I'm really looking forward to having a soulful conversation with you about the challenges you've faced in your life and how you've responded and what impact they've had on who you are today. So let's start with the event in your life that has had the most significant impact on your mind and your soul.
So I would say that the major event that's had a really big impact on my mind and soul is the passing away of my mother when I was 15. So this kind of had some long-term effects and some short-term effects, and it's kind of led me into interesting ways of thinking about the world and about life.
So what would be some of the short-term effects and the long-term effects?
So the short-term effects, I kind of describe it as being encased in a block of ice when you know, from the moment that my mum passed away, like this kind of sense of numbness and being, in this block of ice, and then it taking a long, long time, I would say about 10 years to kind of thaw out from this numb feeling. And so the short-term effects was kind of like pretending like nothing had happened and pretending like everything was okay. And I guess for the most part, I did feel, for a short time that it was okay and that I was getting on with life. But a kind of close death, such as, like your mum's death, is something that you can't really just kind of like get over that quickly. It takes time, and it takes self-compassion, and it takes, I think, friendship and community and knowing about the process of grieving.
So what happened after feeling numb? What was that process?
So it was a very gradual process, and it took that time to start to understand what was going on and why I'd been feeling so kind of disjointed such a long time, or why I'd been feeling so kind of numb and kind of not being able to understand my emotions. And I guess after a period of about 10 years, like it was this slow thawing out process. It was definitely not overnight. There were a few key moments, of course, but it was definitely this process of just day by day, just starting to understand a bit more about what grief means and having that compassion to even reach out to yourself and try and understand what you're going through. But basically after that 10-year period, I started to feel a lot more connected to my mum, not only in the sense of believing that her spirit is still in existence and is still here and constantly present within me and in my life, but also, I guess, in a more physical sense. Like I actually sound a lot like my mum, and I talk a lot like her, and some people say I walk like her, I laugh like her. So I've kind of ended up embodying her a little bit, just kind of, I guess, through as I've grown up. And that kind of experience makes me really feel connected to her, and it shelters me. Like I feel like it shelters me under her kind of protection and her kind of radiance. And I think it took a long time for me to acknowledge that within myself, but I've definitely started to see that radiance that I used to see in her. I've started to see that in myself as well. So that's quite a big step forward from being quite punishing and punitive about the way I'd been around my mum when she was passing away, when she was slowly dying from cancer, to then realizing that all those things are just in the past, and it's okay it's okay to feel those things, but it's also okay to feel alive and happy and glad about all the experiences that she gave me and the current experiences that I'm having, that I feel very much connected to her.
Can you describe a little bit more about that guilt, what the guilt was about, or what actually happened?
It's probably quite normal to feel regret and guilt when someone close to you's passed away. I felt it a lot because as a 15-year-old, I'd been quite like a bit prickly and a bit insular and not like, I mean, as a lot of teenagers are, they're, often in the kind of throes of hormonal change. And so I was definitely not like caring for her in the way that I now think I would have liked to have been. So yeah, there was one moment when she was on a lot of morphine in the palliative care unit, and my aunt was there and my sister was there and my dad was there. And yeah, basically we were all sleeping in the palliative care kind of bedroom that they provided for my mum. And I decided that we were all going around in turns, kind of holding my mum's hand throughout the night, even though she wasn't really that conscious. We were all providing her with that support, and we were holding her hand. And when it came to my turn, it was, 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And I just refused to kind of get out of bed. And that plagued me for such a long time afterwards. And it still is something that's a bit of a tender spot, because I guess she was in so much pain at that point, physical pain. And I'm sure she was grappling in her heart with the fact that she was, about to die. And so for me, that moment kind of signified my own struggle to care for her and to be there for her. And that was a moment that I've often felt regret and remorse around. But going from that to now feeling this sense of connection has been quite a journey. And it's been a journey of forgiving myself and realizing that, I always thought I needed her forgiveness, but really she is such a radiant, she doesn't feel the need to forgive me, I don't think, because she just has this constant generous stream of light. And I really feel that now, when before I didn't. I was really shut off from that a lot.
And what has been some of the things that has helped you process through that? And do you think spirituality in any way has had a role to play in your journey?
Yeah, spirituality has played, I guess, a few different roles. Like I've been really constantly in a relationship with prayer and I guess the Baha'i writings, but particularly Baha'i prayers. I think I've really gained a lot of solace from them. There's a kind of like intellectual framework you can think about life after death, and the fact that we're all going to die, and the fact that this life is very fleeting, and it's a short-term thing, really. Like it's not, sometimes feels like it can be a long-term thing, but really it's just this moment that we have in this life. And basically, so there are a few different ways that framework of understanding death and life after death kind of helped me a lot to see that, although my mum went through this painful experience of having cancer and other things, that was still only a blip in her existence, in her long-term kind of eternal existence. So that's quite a beautiful thought to have, and that I like to remember. And then, just my connection to prayer has been really strong ever since it's happened. Like there's a few prayers that I really take seriously. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
what does that mean, take seriously?
I guess it means that I'm kind of the type of person who kind of can laugh things off quite easily and make a joke out of things to try and kind of deflect. But in terms of prayer, like I genuinely feel like there's a kind of power and an awe that I find in it that I can't find in anything else. And no matter what's happening or what's going wrong, it's constantly this source of courage. And I guess I also like to think, I think it's a self-soothing kind of thing. It kind of soothes the parts of me which are in pain. And so when I say I take it seriously, I think I just don't laugh about it. Mm-hmm. I find it very, very real, and it's a real source of help. Yeah.
Mm. Can you describe what that might feel like when you are praying and that helps you? What is that about? Is it about handing it over to God or the universe? Is it about feeling a connection with your mum during those moments? How does that experience feel, if it is possible to put it into words? Because sometimes it's not possible to put those things into words. So what is that like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's, like I said, it's the self-soothing. You can call it self-soothing, or you can I think it's this spiritual soothing that happens through the words of God. I think there's some kind of mysterious power in them, which I don't think many people understand, but it's definitely present when I engage with prayer. And then, the other feelings, I guess, are, knowing that it kind of connects me with something greater, like not just God, but a kind of greater understanding of, or a greater plan maybe for myself and for my family and my society. I think I try and when I'm thinking about spirituality, I try and think of it in terms of the relationships we all have with each other and the relationships between the individual with society. And so I think that when I am praying, I'm constantly trying to understand how my personal suffering or my personal experiences can somehow be transmuted or channeled into some sort of greater understanding of what society is going through. And obviously, like, society is going through a lot. So I try and see like the two parallels between my suffering and the suffering of, like, I guess the community that I'm in, or like the society that I'm in, and that kind of connection. And it feels like nothing is wasted. Even pain is never wasted. So that's kind of my philosophy on that.
And I said earlier in the introduction that you have said to me before that suffering is the main trigger point for compassion and hope.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah. Well, I think around my mum's death and that period of thawing out that I mentioned, I was very hard on myself. And I think compassion is like an essential part of my healing. Compassion is like the only real answer to suffering. And not just, we can feel compassion to others and we can feel compassion towards ourselves. And ultimately, I think those things interlinked. The more compassion we feel towards ourselves, the more compassion we're able to feel for other people, and vice versa. So, I think that I think we live in a very harsh world, and the more compassionate we can be is the more we can understand where other people are coming from, particularly people that we don't feel we like very much, which can sometimes be other people, can sometimes be ourselves. But basically that I feel like there's this, you can't really have too much of that.
Now, this might be putting you on the spot, but it's something I've often thought about, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Do you think it's possible to have compassion, that real deep level of compassion, without suffering?
Wow, that's quite a deep question. Without suffering, I mean, I think it's harder. It's much harder to feel, unless you're kind of naturally endowed with this, like maybe if you're some sort of prophet or saint or something, or artist maybe, then maybe I feel like it's really hard there's a quote by Khalil Gibran, which I'll be paraphrasing, but he says something to the effect of like, the more that pain digs into your being, or like carves into your being, the more joy you can contain. And I think that's probably like a bit of an equation. Like I actually do think the more suffering you've had is kind of equates to having more compassion. But that's not to say that there aren't exceptions to that. I think there are probably lots of people who are able to. And I think that the thing of framing what suffering is, like, the people suffer in so many different kinds of ways. Like some people it's this hardship and it's this kind of like poverty, and yet they're very happy in other ways. And then other people they're kind of materially okay and they're well off, and they experience extreme forms of suffering, maybe in the form of depression, or in the form of, I guess, sometimes it can be just that kind of emotional feeling lost or feeling alienated from other people. So I think it's really important not to kind of think of suffering in any one kind of way, because it's really such a diverse thing, and it can happen in so many different ways. But ultimately, I think, at the root of it, it's the one thing. It's like this kind of, it's this core thing, but then there's like, it manifests itself in lots of different ways. So and I think everyone does suffer. I think it's kind of a fundamental part of being human.
Suffering is definitely part of life. At some stage, we all go through challenges and difficulties, and they might look different at different phases of our life. But yeah, as you said, it's definitely part of our life. Maya, what would you say to someone who might be going through challenges or loss of a parent, and you went through that at such a vulnerable age, at the age of 15, and it has been a process for you as it is for anyone going through such a loss. What would you say to someone who might be going through something like that?
You know, for anyone who's going through struggles, I think it's so easy to become insular and internalize everything and blame yourself for things that really are just part of life and not to do with you. And I think trying to befriend yourself and maybe look outwards, look to the world around you. Baha'u'llah says, do not busy yourselves with your own concerns. Fix your gaze upon that which will rehabilitate the fortunes of mankind. And I think that's obviously a very grand vision for when you're going through something quite intense and emotional and painful. But really, I think the essence of that for me is like, yes, we are suffering, but there's always a way of channeling that into something beautiful and good. And whether that's for you writing poetry, or whether it's playing sport or doing woodwork or cooking, like whatever it might be, I think there's always a way of really connecting to your inner power through activities. I really believe in I never really used to believe in activities. When my parents used to make me do like crafts and arts and like all sorts of things, I would just like not want to do it. But basically I think there's such a power in just doing things and getting out there into the world. And it's very empowering and it's very healing.
It's connecting with that spirituality, whatever that spirituality might mean for us.
That's right.
And I think the other thing that from what you've shared that I'm taking away is that it is a process, that when we are in the depth of that grief and sadness, there can be a whole lot of emotions. For you, it was guilt, and for some people it might be anger, depression. So there can be a whole range of emotions. And at that time, it might be a good idea to even reach out and connect to mental health services, to a therapist, to a counsellor, as well as reaching out to our support people around us. And it is about being patient and hopeful, because your story has hopefully given hope to people out there that might be going through a significant loss or a trauma. Thank you so much, Maya, for sharing your story, and we really appreciate it. And I'm sure people listening have been very touched by your story.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
And if it's okay with you, I'd love to dedicate today's episode in memory of your mum.
Oh, that would be so beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thank you also to our listeners and our great team who work behind the scenes to bring Mind and Soul Matters to you. If today's episode has raised any concerns for you, please contact your local mental health service. And for our listeners in Australia, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. If you've enjoyed today's episode, remember to click on subscribe on your preferred podcast app and share with friends. For any comments or feedback, please email mindandsoulmatters@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.